hear a dang thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think everyone who may be joining now, we were having some trouble getting the Hangout started, but hopefully it is being recorded on YouTube, and we have all of our team joining it right now. So we apologize for the delay. We were a couple of minutes late. Okay, so it looks like 3 of us are already in here. So I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm Stephen Wilson. I am part of the Rackspace Business Solutions team. I tend to focus on more administrative stuff and just getting people started in SharePoint after they get their farm up and running, or if they're using Office 365 or our Rackspace multi-tenant, helping them out with just sort of the basic setup and the basic beginnings of SharePoint. And then we will, in order, I'll ask Tavis, Ryan, and Kevin to introduce themselves, and then we'll begin our presentation. Thank you very much. Tavis, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Tavis Lovell, and I am also on the Business Solutions team as the Business Intelligence Developer. So I deal a lot with dashboarding and reporting inside of SharePoint and using SQL Server. I think that's all I'm going to say about that.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Keller. I am also on the Business Solutions team. My specialty is SharePoint branding and making SharePoint not look like SharePoint.
And my name is Kevin Hughes. I'm SharePoint architect here at Rackspace, based out of Kansas City, and I'll be doing your presentation today. Today we're going to discuss document lifecycle, and let me share a screen here and we'll get going. As soon as I get the share screen thingy going. I used to know how to do this. There we go. It's the button that says share screen. It's always nice to read the instructions. Oh, quit. So today we're going to be looking at a practical example of document management, the entire document lifecycle. We're going to be using some of the information that we've previously presented in some power hours, content organizer rules and content types and some workflows. We're going to put them all together though. This is actually a similar solution to one I've implemented with a few clients. So hopefully it'll give you some ideas on how to maybe manage your own documents inside SharePoint 2013. And then one of the things that we always struggle with is what to do with documents once they are actually in SharePoint for a while. So we're going to talk a little bit later about document disposition, and we're going to look at information management policies to do that. So right now, as I said, I'm Kevin Hughes, SharePoint architect. Been doing this for many years. A lot of alphabet soup. Got a blog there if you want to take a look at it. I usually blog about what we talk about right after. What I want to talk about this at first is, since we're going to do a practical example, what are we actually trying to achieve? So our scenario is that we have a company called Contoso with a standards and practices department, and that's responsible for creating, maintaining, disposing corporate policies and documents. Many companies probably have a similar department. We also we find out when we do our requirements gathering that these documents are supposed to be available on their intranet in a single location, linked from the corporate intranet portal.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
I think the slides aren't changing for me. I'm still on the first slide, document lifecycle.
Okay, so it's still just showing the first slide? That's strange.
Yeah, I think Ryan said he was seeing the same thing. There, I saw your mouse pass by, though.
Let me make sure I'm sharing the entire... Well, you wouldn't see that if I wasn't sharing the entire screen.
Do you have it in full screen mode?
Yep.
That is not what I see. Just see the regular mode, like you were developing slides, whatever that's called. I don't know.
How about now?
Nah, it's still the same thing.
Weird. Okay. Well, we'll do it this way. So, can you see the practical scenario slide now?
No, I'm still on the first slide.
It shouldn't be on any slide.
I can see your mouse moving around. Do you have PowerPoint on two different monitors, maybe?
No, just a single monitor, man. Okay, let me make sure.
Yeah, it went black for me.
I'm screen sharing. Okay. It says I'm screen sharing. Okay.
I saw the practical scenario slide there for a second. Now I see it.
Okay. So now we see the practical scenario slide inside PowerPoint.
Yep.
All right. Now you see a slide switching.
Yep, I think we're good now.
All right. So, as I was saying, the practical scenario we're going to explore, start with these requirements that we've gathered from our client called Contoso. Basically, their standards and policies department needs a collaborative workspace to be able to create documents, then needs a way to get them stored in proper location on the intranet, and they want this to be an automated system, which reduces the number of, quote, master copies of the current version of the policies. They want to be able to track versions and want employees to always find the current version, even if they've created a shortcut to it from their desktop computers. And then once the policy document has not been modified for a year, they want it to be archived. Sounds simple enough. We also have a couple other requirements that we've come across. Since the collaborative workspace may contain many documents which aren't ready for publication and other confidential material, it should be privately accessible to only the S&P team. And the Internet portal and the policies publication area should be accessible to all employees. So since we're working on SharePoint Enterprise 2013 Enterprise, we're going to be, they want to use that. They've already bought it. So. And what these couple of requirements here tell us is that we're going to probably be working with different site collections. One that is for the S&P team department, and one that is the portal. So that means we're going to have to be fairly creative in the way that we do this in order to maintain all the policy or the privacy issues. So how are we going to go about this? Well, first, since, as I said, we're going to look at site collections. Within those, we'll have a document library, which will have all their working policy documents. We're going to keep it simple. Yeah, most of the departments would have more than one document library, but for today, we're going to do just one. We're going to create an automated routing system that allows the department to determine when a document is ready for publication. And so this way we're going to let them choose when it's ready, and then we're going to have workflow route the document from the collaborative private secured location into the portal standards and policies document library, which will be publicly accessible. And then we're going to use information management policies to manage the disposition of aged documents and route them to a document archive location. Now, if you've worked with SharePoint Designer workflows before, or out-of-the-box workflows, you know that we can't really do this with the out-of-the-box workflows. So we're going to look at SharePoint Designer workflows, but they can't send documents to other site collections just within those the rules that are predefined. So we're going to look at using a content organizer to route between the site collections. And one way that we can do this is we can have the SharePoint Designer workflow send to a drop library in the S&P site, and then that could send it to the portal drop library, drop library, and then that, based upon content type. We could have the workflow also, as I'll show you when we get to the demo, send it directly to the portal doc library, but then we might run into a permissions issue where a generic user might not have permissions to create documents in that portal area. So we're going to do it with an extra step, and we don't have to worry about gaining or using custom permissions inside the portal. And all except for one of these steps can be performed inside the standard SharePoint user interface or SharePoint Designer, which makes it all out of the box, no code, except for one piece that will require access to central administration. And if you've watched last week's demo from Laura, then you will have seen what that is. A lot of these we're going to be covering, as I've already pre-created a few of these steps, but just to save time. But let's go over what we would actually do. Inside our portal site collection, we would turn on the content organizer feature, create a content type called policy, update the content organizer settings to actually recognize that we're going to use content organizer, and then we're going to configure a content organizer rule based upon the policy content type, and then we're going to have a document library there called standards and policies, which we'll add that content type to. The only thing we need to do in central administration is create a send to location that for our demo we're going to call portal doc router. And inside our S&P departmental site collection, we would turn on, basically do the same kind of things we would in the portal, except that we're also going to be creating a workflow in SharePoint Designer there. So let's stop looking at slides and get into the meat and bones of this. So first thing, we have our Contoso main site. Hopefully everybody can see that. And like I said, I've already pre-configured some of these just to save some time, which I think since we were slow getting off the ground is a good thing. And within the site collection here, which is our portal, I've created the standards and policies document library. And you can see, because we have a drop-off library, I've already turned on the content organizer feature. But let's go ahead and take a look at the settings for that in here so that we're all on the same page. We get to the settings for the content organizer. This will be a little review for you if you were with us last week. On our site settings, once we have the content organizer site feature activated, we have content organizer settings and content organizer rules, these two here. In our content organizer settings, we're going to, for our portal, pretty much leave the default but we're going to need to make a note of the submission points, this area here. We're going to need to make a note of the path for the web service URL, because we're going to need to use that a couple of times. And this is the specific area for the drop library, the specific address for accessing the drop library for this site. And we also have containerizer rules. Again, we covered how to create these last week, but I'll show you what I've already pre-configured for policy. Basically, the policy rule is going to take the content type policy that I've created here inside the site collection, and it's going to send it to a library called Standards and Policies, which exists inside this site, and that's about it. If you want to see it as it's as if you were going to enter it, this is what it looks like. Policy, content type is policy, which is in a Contoso group, and we're just going to send it to a library or folder in this site called Standards and Policies. No big deal. Again, exactly how to do this was covered in depth by Laura last week. I encourage you to go look at the last week's video if you want to see that in detail. We've mentioned we've created a content type. Joelle did a nice video on content types before, but I'll show you the content type I created for policy. Again, that's gotten to from settings in the site content types here. And we have a Contoso group with one content type in it called policy. And the only thing that I've really done there is base it off of a document content type and added a column called policy category. And that's just a way for us to add this site column. I'll show you what the site column actually has in it, which is just a choice of the different types of policies, a way to categorize in a typical organization, business ops, financial, regulatory, and so forth, that you might choose. And that's so that that choice is available from wherever we use the content type. There's no extra settings here, made that an optional thing. So one of the things about content types is make many things optional. You can always make them required or otherwise inside document libraries, and we'll be doing some of that during this demo. So back to our main page on Contoso, we have our Standards and Policies library, which we have. If we go to the settings, we'll see that we have added the policy content type. As a quick review on how to do that, inside the settings for the library, we would go to the advanced settings and make sure that allow management of content types is chosen, yes is chosen in the radio button, and then we would have that available in this list of content types. That actually makes this list of content types show up, and then we can add that from the existing site content types. And then you see here that I've also have document. Really can't get rid of document there, but we can make it so that it's not visible by changing the button order and default content type. We determine whether it's visible in our new drop down or not. And by that I mean with our files, new document, we see that we don't have document even though it's listed. We just have policy. So that's the only content type that is available if we're going to create one. All right. So that's pretty much all we need to do in our site collection for our portal. One thing now that we can do, since we have that library set up, we have our drop library set up, we can now configure it within Central Admin to be a send to location. Again, Laura had a nice demo on this last week, but we'll quickly give you an overview of what the steps again within central administration. Now this will take proper permissions to be able to get here, but wanted to make sure you knew how to ask for it if you don't have the access yourself. Under general application settings, there's configure send to connections, and within the particular web application, this being contoso.com, we have portal doc router as our send to location. We've also got another one here called document archive, but I'll talk about that a little later. One thing about doing this, we have the ability to not only set where it's going to go, but what kind of action we're going to take. In this one, I've chosen the copy. We have copy, move, and move and link, leave a link, but I've chosen to copy this as the action for this, and the reason for that is that we're looking at having this be collaborative in a secure location, and then send to a public location. We don't want to just move the document. We don't want to leave it in the original location, so they can continue to work on it and not have to create multiple copies. And then of course when next they say ready to publish, then we can make sure that the routing takes place properly, and we just overwrite and create new versions. So, and that might lead you to believe I haven't done that for our standards and policies back here in our main site collection. Sorry, I'm jumping around fairly fast, but that's what's good about video. You can always rewind. You're old enough to understand rewind? No, never mind. So we have turned on versioning here. We're just going to create major versions in our main area. We're not going to have draft because we don't want to have to just publish. We want them to get automatically published. And of course, in our I'm going to go look at the policy or the content organizer rules for policy, and as you can see, we are not choosing. We're not doing any folders or anything else. It's just going to overwrite since we have versioning turned on. So, okay. Now I'm sorry I've jumped around a lot trying to get to the meat and bones of this, which is actually how to make everything work. So now let's go into our standards and policies site collection. Again, this is a separate site collection because we want to have the ability to have our own security model and make sure that only the people that need to be here are here. We're going to make sure that anything that needs to be published gets published automatically. It's what we're here for. So inside here, we do have the standards and policies document library, which I have created, but it and here's our main site, but the standards and policies library. Notice we don't have document library listed because I haven't done any of those configurations here. We're going to assume that we've already we may be doing this same kind of operation for other departments, so that's why we pre-configured it in the portal. So let's go ahead and inside this site collection, we'll turn on our content organizer feature. Remember, that is site scoped, not site collection, so that's under manage site features. Content organizer right here, and we will activate that. Shouldn't take but a second. All right, and so now we see that our drop-off library is available to us. And now that since we're already in settings, let's go ahead and do whatever else we need to do in settings. In our content organizer settings, we are actually going to need to, you see the defaults here do not normally allow rules to specify another site as a target location, but we're going to go ahead and do that. One of the things that since we've created a send to location central admin, we'll be able to pick that in our rules. But if that send to location is another site, I have seen interesting results if you don't say allow it to send to the other site. So it's curious. I haven't gotten deeply into that. The rest of it we're going to keep as basically default settings just for the demo, except that we want to preserve or save the original audit log and properties of the submitted content. This is going to allow us to maintain all the metadata for the document, no matter what format it's in, even if it's calculated columns and such. We just got to make sure that everything on the receiving end can display it all. Again, we have our submission point that we will need to make note of. We will probably need that at some point. We're going to go ahead and click OK, though. And we're not going to do a content organizer rule just yet. One of the things about content organizer rules, we can't have it interact with locations that don't already contain the content type that we're going to work with. So we need to make sure that we've created that and then assigned it to the appropriate document library. And I haven't done that yet here. So site content type, we're going to create a new one. Should be pretty easy. We're going to create a policy. Now we could do this in a content type hub and just inherit it all, but haven't done that. I'll show you about content type hubs and such later, maybe. Not today, but in a later demo. So our policy is a document content type, and I'm going to go ahead and create our Contoso group so it's easy to find. And now we have a content type. Nothing there. So what we need to do is go ahead and make sure that we've created it to be the same as the destination one. Remember, it had an extra column in it. So let's make sure that we have the policy category column. Notice it doesn't have it yet. And we can only add site columns, but that's okay. We haven't created a site column yet, but we can create a new one here on the fly, and we'll call that policy category. Might be wondering why I didn't just call it category. That's already a reserved word because it's already in use, a used column name, so can't call it just category. Again, we're going to group this site column so that we can find it easier later, and we're going to see should have copied and pasted this, but I didn't. Hope I don't typo it. That's it. We're not going to have a default, so we'll just get rid of that. And now we're done with it. Now we have our policy category column. Not really going to add anything here to the content type because we're not going to do the overall management of it here. We could set information management policies and a few other things with these, but some of those I know we've covered in previous videos, so just remind you we can do a lot with content types. So if we go back here, we see our Contoso policy, content type, and now we should be good to go to add it to our standards and policies library. Again, that is done through the library settings. And notice we don't have a list of content types. That means we have not allowed management of it. So let's go to our advanced settings and allow management of content types. And the rest of our options here, we're just going to leave the way they are for now. And now we have the ability to manage content types. We need to add it from our existing ones. It's existing because we just created it. Notice I said if we create it in our own group, we can easily find it. So Contoso, policy, we'll add that. Say OK. And now if we actually leave settings like they are, then we're going to have the ability for them to create documents and policies. It's not necessarily bad in this case, but I want policy to be the default. So let's change that. All we got to do there is put that as our number one position and say OK. And now policy will be shown before document. The reason I want to go ahead and leave them documents here is because they might need to create documents on the fly to support this. This is a working location, so it's not a publicly accessible. We don't need to control it as much. Now, one thing, since we've added that content type, notice that our columns available have changed. We now have the policy category there, and we also I have created a date published column here. That is something we're going to be using in our automation. And I also want to add a column here called ready to publish. And that's just going to be a yes/no column. I'm not going to choose yes or no, though, because we're going to use this in a workflow, and choice of no, yes allows us to basically reverse the default of that and actually see it inside our workflow a little easier. I've noticed in SharePoint Designer workflows that the yes/no checkbox, while it works, can't be used effectively with some commands. Not necessarily ones we're going to use here, but it's just kind of a habit I've gotten into to use the choice of for yes/no, and then I'll always reverse it. That way I get the no here as the default, and I don't have to do anything. Okay, so reason we add ready to publish is that was, if you remember, one of the criteria. We're going to allow them to say it's ready to publish, and that way they get to determine when it's ready to go out and be public. So let's see, what's the next thing for us to do? Next thing is to make sure that we have our rules set up, and that would be in our content organizer rule, site settings, content organizer rules. We're still in our standards and policies, site collection. We're going to create a new rule. We're just going to name it policy anyway, just like we did in the other site collection. We're going to pull it based on have it run on content type Contoso group policy. Now, if we had named this content type something else in the other site collection, then we can tell it what that would be by saying it's got a different name somewhere else. But since we named it the exact same, we don't have to do that. We don't have to worry about any conditions. We're not worried about whether it's created before, or we've already got content type, so that's already a condition. Now, if you remember in our Contoso portal site collection, we had target location as a library or folder in this site, but we actually want to use this rule to send to another content organizer in a different site. And we have available to us all the send to collections or send to locations that we have created in Central Admin. Remember, we created two, or you saw two that I've pre-created. We're going to send this to the portal doc router. Now, what that means is that we're not going to worry about where in the standards and policies site, we're not going to worry about the final home. We're just going to send it to the portal document router and let it worry about where to send all of the documents. So we only have to configure those libraries once. We only have to worry about the exact locations once, and everything is cool. And again, we're doing it this way instead of doing it directly through the workflow, so we don't have to worry about changing our permissions on our portal site to allow people that might just be generic users here to submit to that drop-off library in our portal. We can actually hide that drop-off library in our portal so nobody even sees it, out of sight, out of mind. Security through obscurity. And this way, we could also even create a standard upload process here in standards and policies. So, just any document through our drop-off library. And if it's something that needs to stay in this site collection, it can, or if it needs to go to another location, then we can have that library, drop-off library, send it appropriately. So we gain a little versatility as well as alleviate one of our difficulties. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to, we have our standards and policies site collection, we have our standards and policies library, we have it configured and ready to go. What we need now, let's see, we've got our Contoso library, we've got our drop-off libraries, content organizer rules. All we need to do now is create a mechanism to detect when the document is ready to publish and to send it to the appropriate location for routing. So we're going to do that inside SharePoint Designer. Inside SharePoint Designer, I've already opened up the standards and policies site. Because this is where our workflow is going to live, inside there. When we get here, we can look at all the different files. Of course, if you've never opened SharePoint Designer before, it is a fairly powerful tool. But don't worry if you don't have permission to do anything through the UI, you won't have any permission to do anything here either. What we're doing will take some proper permissions, administrative permissions within the site collection to be able to make this work. Since we're going to create a workflow, let's take a look at our workflows area. And I've already started a publish policy workflow. Haven't finished it yet, but I wanted to go ahead and get it started so we had, again, save a little bit of time because I want to get onto these information management policies. This is, you'll see, a SharePoint 2010 workflow. Even though that we are in SharePoint 2013 interface, I wanted to make sure that I showed you this can work. Everything I'm doing here can work in SharePoint 2010 as well. And so I'm going to use the 2010 workflow steps, which work just fine in 2013. And you don't have to worry about your environment having been configured for the SharePoint 2013 workflow engine to get this to work. So it's, again, trying to keep it simple. What we need to do here when we look at our initial workflow configuration is, when does it start? What is going to make this workflow actually fire and start looking at our criteria to see if it's ready to move things? Well, we likely, we always want to be able to make it manually started so that we can test it and retest it, or cancel and fire it on demand if we need to troubleshoot. But as far as the automation, we can always start a workflow automatically when the item is created, meaning that as soon as they upload a new document, it's going to look to see if the it's ready to go. But what we might think about there is, if they've just created a brand new document and just saved it, it probably isn't ready to go. But we'll go ahead and take a look at it. It won't hurt anything. But we definitely want to take a look at running this workflow whenever an item is changed. Reason being is that is going to, every time the document is actually updated, we want to look at it and see if the they have checked that it is ready to publish. So what we need to do there is check this box, and then we'll edit our workflow. And the only things I've really done here is outline the steps that we're going to be using in our workflow, which we are going to be using these steps. We're going to check to see if it's ready to publish. Then we're going to send to, not the portal doc router, we're going to send it to our document router. Actually, let's call it our S&P drop library. That'll be less confusing. Okay, so, and then lastly, we're going to set a last published date so that the individuals that are working with these documents can actually see when things were last published. To check ready for publishing, what we'll need to do is make sure we have all the current columns and so forth available to us. So we're going to have a condition if a current field, we're going to look for ready to publish equals no, we're going to stop our workflow. It's not ready to publish. So this way, every time the document changes, we're going to look to see if that ready to publish equals no, and if it does, it's obviously not ready to publish. And the reason I'm doing these different steps is much easier for me to be able to keep track of what I'm doing. I could do everything in one step, but I prefer it this way. You'll also like it this way when you start using SharePoint 2013 workflows, because we can jump from step to step, so kind of get used to this. Now, if we want to send to a drop library, we need to take a look at one of the core actions called send document to repository. There's a couple of ways we can go about this. This is one of them. We could also do a copy list item function. And we're not going to do both of these, but I want to show you that we could do either one. But in this case, the copy list item in this list to this list, not necessarily going to work perfectly for us since we're sending to a drop library. A generic user with only read permissions in that drop library would not be able to use this particular activity. But the submit file one, it does work. So let's get rid of that action. And we're going to submit file using this action. Notice these are the same actions we have available when we created our routing rules for our content organizer rules: copy, move, and leave a link. Again, we're going to copy, and this destination router. This destination router, what that actually means is we're going to need, if we click that button, we get a big string builder. So I can see what I'm typing. We're going to need our in our standards and policies. Remember our content organizer settings, our submission point. We need this location. I'm going to copy that, come back to SharePoint Designer, and paste it. So that is what we need to put there, our actual drop location. With this explanation, that's whatever you want to put in there for notes. Copied to something, completed, whatever you want there. And I just leave the output to variable. This is a variable inside the workflow that's going to contain this information during this operation. And it's a local variable. It'll go away once the workflow is done. And then lastly, we're going to set the last published date. Since we're going to copy this out, we're going to set a value. Where is it? Set field in the current item. So we're going to set the date published to today's date. Now, by clicking the little ellipse button, we get to choose whether it's current date or specific date. We're going to set it to the current date. That way it'll pull the exact date time of when this workflow actually runs. And then, actually, I'm going to create another step here. Something that I sometimes forget is, now that I've done this, I need to clear out the ready to publish. So I'm going to create another step called reset the ready to publish, and I'm going to set another value here, ready to publish, to no. Okay, because they will have set it to yes to get it to fire and go past the ready to publish check. Then once it sends to the drop library, sets date published, I want it to reset the ready to publish value to no. And that should be our workflow. Going to go ahead and publish this. And now that should be available to us. If we look at our standards and policies library, workflow settings, you'll see that we have published policy workflow available to us in this list. So isn't that wonderful? All right. So that tells me we are ready to give this a try. We can, let me get I've got a document here somewhere. Let's pull this, or where is it? Maybe it's on, no, it's not there. I always forget where I keep these things. Yeah, let's take a couple of documents and throw them out here. All right, so we have our documents in our drop library, or in our regular standards and policies library. And all we've got to do is edit the properties of these. And if we want to, we can we can, you know, we can take this field away with a custom form, or we can hide it, you know, during our editing here. No worries, we can do that later in demo. But our big key item here is it ready to publish? We want to make sure that we have chosen policy, and that way we get policy category. And our policy category, let's see there, is it ready to publish? We're going to say yes, it's ready to publish, just to fire our workflow. Say yes, and we'll see that our workflow is in progress. This one completed because we had a no here. This one's in progress, and now it says completed and has reset to no. If we look at our drop library, we shouldn't see anything there. If we go to our Contoso main drop-off library, we don't see anything there. But in standards and policies, we now see our document and version 1. So it was that quick. As soon as we said it's ready to publish, everything fired. Our workflow worked first time out the gate, and all our rules worked. We have now a publicly available and viewable policy. If we then need to go back to our standards and policies library, if we now have let's say we have, let's change this. Let's say we edit the policy, or or edit the document. I'm just going to make a small change to the document. Save it back. And now we'll edit our properties and say yes. And take a look here, and we'll see that that's completed. Back in Contoso main, we should see now that we have version 2, because it has now updated with a new version. And we see that what we open from there is the updated copy. Now that's cool. That's nifty neato. That gets us publishing. That gets our creation. It gets our publishing to a public location. But I have 5 whole minutes to tell you how to get it out of here. I apologize for running over. Let me see if I can't go quickly through this. We're gonna create an archive site collection, same kind of content organizer rules. I'm going to use a regular document library for our archiving. The idea here is that we're going to take a look at once the and there's our send to location. Once we have an idea of what we want to do, we need to turn on in-place records management, and I'll explain that when we get to it. And we want to configure information management policy settings. What information management policy settings are there? Let me give you a quick summary here, what they're for. It's a set of rules that allow us to attach a rule to a particular content type in a particular location, or a content type no matter its location, and it allows us to set criteria for what to do with it after a period of time or some other criteria. These are enabled by and configured by a server administrator and enforced on both server and client applications, which means that they can be set off from within your Office client. You can associate them with site collection policy, then associate that policy with a content type or list and library. I'm putting these up here so you'll be able to see them on the video playback. I'm going to run through them pretty quick here. Associate a set of policy features directly with a library or with a content type, and then add that content type someplace else. What's available? You get 3 categories: retention, auditing, labeling, and barcode. The retention is what we'll be most interested in today, but I have this again here for you to reference in the video. You can move to the recycle bin, permanent delete. Most of my clients really hate that idea. Scares the crap out of them. You can transfer the item to another location. You can start a workflow. You can have multi-staged policies, so you can say, based upon a particular criteria, skip to another stage. You can declare it to be a record. You can delete previous drafts or delete all previous versions, so you're only doing something with the latest version. If we get into auditing, you can track things based on content type as opposed to everything in a library, especially if you're going to use that content type multiple locations. Labeling is a deprecated feature in SharePoint 2013, but it is still available. If you've got a 2010 legacy site, it still works. But the idea there was to basically create whenever a document is stored with that policy active, it'll add something into the document, some text for printing, and then you can actually put a barcode on it if you've got that technology for barcode readers or barcode insertion. SharePoint does support it. So again, I got a couple of minutes. Let's see if I can't get this, get at least to show you. I may run just a few minutes over since we started a little late, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. As we saw in Central Admin, I've already created the document archive send to connection. And that is going to our archive site collection. Nothing special about the archive site collection, but we've chosen move and leave a link for this. And the reason I say move and leave a link is I want to move it so that the storage is in a different site collection. I chose a different site collection for archive so that if this is an on-premises or a dedicated hosting situation, like at Rackspace, then you have the ability to move that site collection into its own database and manage that database storage differently than the active ones. We're going to leave a link, that way people that have created a shortcut to the main document in the location they expect will still be able to go there. They'll still have shortcuts that work if they've created a direct link on their desktops. Everything still works from the user point of view. We just have moved the storage location to the archive site collection. So back in our Contoso main, in our standards and policies library, this is where we're going to take a look at our information management policy settings inside the library settings. Information management policy settings are right here under permissions and management. Now this will have a list of all the different content types available in this library. And we're going to look at the policy content type right now. It's really the only one we're concerned about for now. We can, as others are added, they can be managed differently, or you can create the same thing. So we click on it, and now we have the ability to describe it. We're going to archive to the archive site collection. We can also, this is the policy statement that everyone would see. The administrative description is for us to figure out what it's doing. This would be the policy statement where we might, per regulatory code 12345, this is moved to another location. Whatever you want to put there, so that you can, especially if you're going to be deleting, you have the ability to. This is why we're going to delete, because we have a policy, or internal policy, whatever. Under retention, remember I said we can schedule how content is managed and disposed. All we got to do to get those options is check a box, enable retention. Now, the reason I said we're going to take a look at records versus non-records is we have the ability to manage them if they are a record or a non-record. What we can do here, and the difference from our point of view here, is if it's a record, then it becomes immutable. It's archived. Nobody can make any edits to it, and even if they have permission to go look at it, it is a permanent. It's in its permanent final form. So what we might do here is, since we're not storing them as records, we want to be able to overwrite them while they're being stored in our regular standards and policies library. We might actually add a stage where I think the criteria said 1 year once it's a year old. So let's say the last date it's updated plus 1 year. Now the different things we have available are days, months, and years. But let's say 1 year later, we perform an action. Now we have these actions available: move to recycle bin permanently. We went over those in a slide. We might declare this a record. So after a year of it not being updated, then we, declare it a record. Now it's read only. We say OK. Now we might, now that it's a record, say that after it's been declared a record, if somebody hasn't gone in and made any change whatsoever, let's say we're going to do something only a day later, and now we're going to actually transfer it to another location. Now this is only going to allow us to move to our send to locations, but we don't have to worry about any workflows or anything else. we're going to move and leave a link, just like our document archive rule says is set to be able to do, and transfer due to organizational policy. We could tell it to do something else, but since we set our document archive to be move and leave a link as a manual operation, let's keep it the same thing. That way we have consistency. And we'll say OK. Now, the reason I said we're going to make it a record after a year, and then a day later we're going to say send it. That way, if somebody's got an alert, they'll see a change that say, oh, this is declared a record. Wait a minute, we don't want that to happen. So they have the ability to go in and change it. But we also now have it as a record. It's read only. It's immutable, and it's a year and a day later going to be sending to the document archive location. This would, of course, meet your any of the criteria for your regulatory requirements, because it's only a year and a day. Some of the other things that we might do here is in our retention stage, we could maybe start a workflow. If there was a workflow associated with this list, we could tell it to do a lot of things. One thing that we might, if I had time, we might show you, just create a specific workflow that notifies whoever is responsible for a particular type of document. Like for policies, we might go say send a notification to the Centers and Policies department head saying, hey, this is about to be moved and archived. If you don't take action, this is going to happen. Otherwise, go and here's what you do to keep that from happening. And that's especially something that review process with a workflow is especially important if you're going to be deleting instead of archiving, which we might do in the archive location. A year later, we're going to send it to archive location, but now it's an archive. We might actually have a formal retention policy that says this is only supposed to be held 7 years, and then delete it. So at that point, we would delete it, or at least send it through review. All right, so that's our information management policies. Again, if you want to track what goes on there, I'll go ahead and show you these quickly. Auditing, instead of setting auditing for your site, if you just want to check and find out what's going on with these particular policies, you can audit these. They'll show up in your reports for your site, and your audit logs and your usage logs or usage reports. So barcodes, prompt user to insert a barcode, that's all it is. And in labels, like I said, that's deprecated for SharePoint 2013, but still available to support the old 2010. And all that does is, go ahead and let you, set some property, some text to be inserted on every document. All right. I haven't heard anybody say anything about any questions, but I know we're a little bit over time. I apologize for that. It was a little rough getting started. So, any questions before we cut this one off for today?
I'll also chime in here and say that we were having some technical difficulties, so there may not be an option for people to be watching this live, but we will try and get it posted on YouTube as quickly as possible. So any of you who have Twitter accounts with a good number of followers, just send Twitter messages telling people that they may not have been able to get into the Hangout, but that the recording will be going up on YouTube soon.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for indulging us for the day, and I invite you to return again next week. I don't know if we've set a topic yet, but stay tuned, and I'm sure it will be extremely informative and exciting.
Thanks, everybody.